afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the behind the scenes on opening night of Long Way Down. My name is Stephanie Shonekan, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Albee Theatre. And the tradition of the behind the scenes events began to give to our patrons and those in the community an opportunity to contextualize the shows we produce. We want you to understand why we picked a play or musical over and beyond the brilliant artistry, while highlighting themes that resonate with us and the surrounding communities. And what better way to do it than have our two guests here today? And we're all excited and fangirling, so am I at this moment. We have Jason Reynolds among us here. Before that, I would like to invite Stephanie Shonekan, the professor and ethnomusicology and dean of the College of Arts and Humanities at the University of Maryland. Shonekan earned a doctorate in ethnomusicology and folklore with a minor in African American Studies in 2003 from Indiana University. Her dual heritage combining West Africa with the West Indies allows her to straddle the Black world comfortably. She has published articles and book chapters on Afrobeat, Fela Kuti, Nigerian and African American hip hop, soul music, and country music. Her publications explore the nexus where identity, history, culture, and music meets. She has published many books, and I'm so honored to welcome her today to lead us in this conversation with none other than Jason Reynolds, who is born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Oxford, Maryland. Reynolds found inspiration in rap to begin writing poetry at 9 years old. He focused on poetry for approximately the next 2 decades, only reading a novel cover to cover for the first time at the age of 17, and publishing several poetry collections before he published his own first novel, When I Was the Greatest, in 2014. He won the Coretta Scott King John Septo Award for New Talent for this work of prose, and 7 more novels followed in the next 4 years, including Ghost, and 2 more books in what became his New York Times best-selling track series, Patina and Sunny, As Great as You, winner of the 2016 Burgess Prize, the 2017 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work for Youth and Teen, and the 2017 Schneider Family Book Award, and a Marvel comic called Miles Morales Spider-Man. Reynolds returned to poetry with Long Way Down, a novel in verse which was named a Newbery Honor Book, a Prince Honor Book, and a Best Young Adult Work by the Mystery Writers of America's Edgar Awards. Let's welcome Jason Reynolds and Stephanie Shonekan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Hope everybody's doing well and as excited as I am. First of all, let's just acknowledge that you have 2 people up here with beautiful hair. So there's one thing that Shruti missed from the bio of Jason, and that is that he is a graduate of the University of Maryland. And so for me, this is quite, go Terps, yes, yes, yes. So for me, this is quite a delicious event because I get to interview one of our illustrious alums as the Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities. Just having come through commencements, I mentioned Jason's name at every commencement and invited our graduates to come see what is possible from the alumni journey from the University of Maryland. So Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
I want to, before we get to talk about long way down, I'd love to talk about your long way up. And so we know you were born in DC. What does DC mean to you?
You know, it's, first of all, good evening, everybody. It's good to see what does DC mean to me? It's interesting. The way I was raised, my mother, who was born in, who moved to DC when she was 10 from South Carolina, lived in Northeast, lived in Trinidad area. My aunties, everybody lived sort of on that side of town. They would always tell us that there were two different ways to look at the city. They would say there's Washington and there's DC, and those places aren't the same. And that when people come from out of town and they go down to the Smithsonian, which is beautiful,
Right.
They go and they want to sort of sightsee the monument, the Capitol, and all this, that, and the third. They're in Washington, right? But the cultural elements of the city that historically, I always tell people that the Harlem Renaissance doesn't happen if this city isn't here, if Chocolate City isn't here first to galvanize those artists and those thinkers who then moved to Harlem to create this movement, right? But we don't talk about it, right? We don't talk about why Duke Ellington's face is on the Reformer building, why there's a school named after him here, what the 930 Club actually was before it was the 930 Club, what Bohemian Caverns actually was before it is whatever supper club it is these days, right? Like a city that's rooted in culture, in this particular case, specifically Black American culture, that created an epicenter of art and creativity and grit and resilience and love and community, right? Like you hear the story of Ben Chili Bowl kills me now. First of all, I can't eat it now because my body don't do that no more, right? At this age, I can't eat a chili dog, right? But I think about how Ben Chili Bowl turned over when Obama went to get a photograph of Obama. And the next thing you know, you have like 3,000 people in line for a chili dog. And I'm like, but there's so much history in that particular building, right? And how we protected that building because they protected us, right? How it wasn't burned during the riots because of the respect that the community had for the Ali family, right? It's a very specific thing. And so, long story short, what does the city mean to me? I'm proud to have roots here. I came back here after living in New York for 15 years to build a career. And everyone said, like, well, you're gonna go to LA, you're gonna move to Miami, and I'm like, I'm going home. And I'm gonna buy me a house right in the hood, and I'm gonna be there, and then all the kids know exactly that he lived right there, right? and that means the world to me.
And I definitely want to come back to music a little bit later. As Shruti said, I'm an ethnomusicologist, so love to talk about music.
My favorite class in college was ethnomusicology.
Let's write that down.
It was the best.
I love hearing that. DC is also known for go-go music,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the energy, the vibe of go-go music?
I used to give a speech. I used to give a lecture years and years ago, connecting go-go music to what I do as a writer and how it's influenced it. Growing up, is everyone familiar with this music? Sometimes I take it for granted, and I realize that it's changing now. Not only is the music changing or the ability to access that music, also DC has changed, and not everybody is familiar with some of the stuff that we're discussing. So to make sure that everybody's on the same page, go-go music to me, and as an ethnomusicologist, I feel a little bit skittish to say this in front of you, but to me, go-go music is the blackest music on the planet. And the reason why I believe this, and the reason I've been trying to write write something about this, and the reason I believe this is because it's all of the musics, right? It takes influence from all of the musics, not just the American classical musics like jazz, right, which is ours, right, or blues, which is ours. You also have to acknowledge like field songs,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because it's in there, right? The call and response
Yes,
of that is
it's right
in there. You have to acknowledge the Black church
Mhm.
because it's in there. Even the go-go itself represents the Black church and what the Black church experience is.
Mhm.
We have to acknowledge the drums that are being played, which are not indigenous to this particular
That's
country.
right.
Drums that are coming out of Africa and South America that we use in the way that they're used there, right? We have to talk about sort of the funk, right? I mean, the go-go is funk music, right? We have to talk about rock and roll. Chuck Brown was a guitar player. People who know Chuck Brown and remember how he was. Chuck Brown got blues albums. He got, people don't even know all the music that he made outside of go-go music, right? And Bustin' Loose, right? And so now everybody's like, oh, that's Chuck Brown.
Chuck Brown.
But so to me, the music is, when I think about it, it just has every element of like all the Black musics in one, all the traditional, because music is evolving and changing, right?
Of course.
That being said, the one thing that I always loved about it is that growing up, if all you wanted to do was go to the go-go with a shirt or a sign that had your neighborhood on it, your street on it, the name of your crew, because whoever was on the microphone was going to look into the crowd at one point, and it was going to be one part of a few times of the night, there would be a moment where they put what they call it a pocket beat, which basically means the drummer is going to close the hi-hat, which means all of the sort of crash of the cymbal will sort of close up, and there's a very specific rhythm being played on what we call the congos, but are called the conga drum, and so there's this moment where the lead, we say the lead talker, right, where the person on the microphone looks into the crowd to see all the signs in the shirts, and he just starts to call out your neighborhood. So he'll say, oh, whatever you have written. So he'll say, we see you, Lil J from Wheeler Road. We see you, Big Mike from Trinidad Ave. We see you, Montana, right, Southside, and like and he's just calling them out. And the reason this meant the world to us is because the following week you could go to the store and you could look for your date, right, the date that you went to that go-go and where it took place. It was like, 4:15 at the Black Hole, backyard, 4:15 at the Black Hole, right? And you find that cassette tape, you spend $5 and you buy it. Get in your car and you fast forward, because there's going to be one part in this set where your name is going to be called, and the whole city can hear it, right? And that meant the world. So when I think about what I do and what I'm trying to do, what I have been trying to do for the last 20 years, is I want some kid to read this stuff and say like, oh, the whole world knows I'm here. The whole world, the whole city knows that my story, that my life exists in the world. And so go-go music is I'll always love it.
Yeah, oof. That's powerful. I'm just buzzing here because this is the stuff that I think about a lot. It's what woke me up growing up in West Africa. So I would argue that there's some other music that's blacker, but
Is it blacker because it's African? Because I think that can be argued.
Well,
that diaspora is important.
That's true.
We can fight about it later.
All right, great. So I want to go back to your time at the University of Maryland, if I may, just for a little bit.
Careful.
No, I'm gonna. So at one of the commencements, I was sitting in front of some of the faculty, and a faculty member reached over and said, I hear you're going to see Jason Reynolds on Saturday. Give him my love. And that was Mike Olmert.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what it meant to be at the University of Maryland, so far away from DC, but also so close.
Yeah. It was, first of all, I didn't know. I went to Maryland. I only applied to a few schools. I wasn't that great of I was like a high school student. It's so funny because I was a high school student that I feel like all my classmates thought I was doing really well, but no one ever saw my report cards. So everybody thought, it's so interesting because of sort of the way I moved around school and whatever I did extracurricularly, but I was a struggling student and didn't get into most of the universities that I applied to. But really, I only wanted to go to Maryland because when I was a kid, I had like hoop dreams like all of us do. And I went to a basketball camp at Maryland, and I had never seen grass so green.
Oh.
And so in my mind, if anybody's ever been on Maryland's campus, it looks like a movie campus.
Yeah.
And especially at a time when we grew up with those movies, like you know, it looked like John Hughes. It looked like it was so weird. It was like people were playing frisbee and like I'm like, what is going on? This is like what is. And I had never seen that. That wasn't my environment. So I'm like, I want to do this, right? And I went to dining hall and the food was good. And I was like, at least it was back then. I don't know what it's like now, but back then I was like, this is pretty good food. Like, you know, they got ice cream bars and all that, so it was good. And so I ended up coming to Maryland. Now when I get to Maryland, it's a bit of a culture shock.
Sure.
My roommate was from Amherst, New York, and he said, the first day I move in, and I'm moving in 45 pairs of sneakers, and he is befuddled, right? And he's like, I want to tell you, I've never been in any close proximity to a Black person. I'm not afraid, but I want to be honest, which I appreciated. And we ended up having an interesting half a semester before I got out of there. I couldn't, not because of him, but because he didn't understand the stakes. So like at one point, there's like a brick of drugs in the sock drawer. And he's like, it's nothing, Jay, I'm just pinching off of it. And like, maybe I'm making a little money here and there, I'm smoking a little bit, woo, woo, woo. And I'm like, bro, I don't have a plan B.
Right.
I don't have an Amherst to go back home to, right? Like that's not, you know, and so we had that whole thing. And then classes were really, really complicated for me. So Michael Ormer, saying his name almost brings tears to my eyes because he was such a salve. You know, to me, I mean, I failed English 101 twice. They put me on academic probation because they wanted to, and I also failed math too. So like I was one of the kids who couldn't do either. Usually you're good at one. I was not good at either. Failed English 101 twice, failed math, failed remedial math twice. Begged my teacher for like any kind of extra, anything just to squeak through. And she granted that. Then I took a Shakespeare class, got a D in that. That's when I had Professor, did anyone have Ted Limon? Oh, everyone's so fortunate. And he knows I feel this way. I've been very honest to his face. So I don't feel bad about it because I've told him, I've let him know how I felt about him being a bit of a dream killer. Seriously, I mean, that's a very real thing. He was not constructive, and he was so rigid that there was no room for academic, like for rigorous discourse. Like I should be able to say that I believe that Toni Morrison belongs in the canon. My thesis,
because that's the truth.
My thesis was arguing this, and he thought it was laughable. He said that nobody outside of the dead white men who are in the canon belong in the canon because nobody changed the face of literature like they did. I brought up Zora Neale Hurston. I brought up, I mean, all kinds of people, right? And neither here nor there. So I go through all of this. Gene Jarrett was there. Did you know him? He wasn't there long. He was a young professor who actually got me to read that first book, which was Black Boy. And I always have a lot of respect for him. But then I took Michael Ormer. I had no business in his class. He taught 17th century British literature.
That's right.
He taught 17th century British literature. I had no interest in 17th century British literature, but it was the only course available when I'm finishing up like my schedule for I need the credits. And I'm like, I'm gonna cook it. And I get into his class and he says, listen, and any of you who know Professor Ormer knows that he's kind of he's a professor, but he don't really act like a professor. He kind of just does his own thing, right? He's really irreverent. And so he says, listen, I know that 90% of you have no idea what you're doing in this class. He said, I already know that. He said, so instead of me trying to sort of make this class harder than it has to be and try to figure out ways to put pitfalls and potholes in your way as you try to just get out of this class. He's like, all I really want to do is figure out a way that at the end of this semester, you're as excited about this stuff as I am. That's it. He's like, you're at least like, this is interesting. He said, if I can get that out of you, then we're all good. And he worked with us. If we weren't ready for the quiz, like he was the kind of guy who was like, we got a quiz coming up on Friday. And if Thursday came, we were like, we're not ready. He'd be like, all right, we'll do it on Monday. Get ready, right? Like, because he just understood what it was. And the reason why he asked about me, and the reason why I always get very emotional talking about him is because right after this one teacher who's a Shakespeare scholar sort of trashed me over and over again about the canon and about my own work and about all this and that and the third, I had written this collection of poetry. At the time, I was selling books out of the trunk of my mom's car. I was using that money to help her and us. We were together paying my way through college because she knew I wanted to be an artist. She knew student loans were going to make that very difficult for me to do. So we were like, let's just attack this thing, right? So, but you got to work, right? And so I'm working and I'm selling these books out of my dorm room, out of my mom's car, and I write a new book my sophomore junior year, and I'm going to get it printed. And I go to Michael Omer and I say, do you think you could read this and maybe offer me a foreword? And he wrote the most beautiful foreword.
Totally, yeah.
And I look back at the book and it's so bad. So bad. It's right. It's like it's unedited. It's like, but he could see it. But he could see it, right? And the only other time at Maryland that happened was when I did the next book I made. I took it to David Driscoll. And he gave me the same grace, and so shout out to Michael Omer. Michael Omer he saved sort of the way I felt about the Academy. Him and Zita Nunez. If any of y'all knew Zita Nunez, what an amazing human being. The two of them were Caribbean Lit was amazing.
Wow, thank you so much, Jason. I love the sincerity, the openness. I think it's important for all of us educators to understand that we are dream makers or dream killers.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And I also love to hear you talk about the canon. I think we are still struggling with the canon and having deep conversations in every field, which we should have been having hundreds of years, like at least 100 years ago. So I want to now turn to a couple of questions around the importance of the humanities, the importance of arts.
Okay.
You know, we sit on a college that feels very STEMmy. You know, STEM is on the rise, and the arts and humanities seem to be ebbing away. I don't think so, as someone who studies it and I feel straddles the arts and humanities. But what would you say to my fellow deans about the importance of the arts and humanities, not only on college campuses, but in high schools, in middle schools? Yeah,
to me, the arts and humanities, to me, the importance of them are in their names. Arts and humanities is literally the art of being human. To me, right? It teaches us the art of being human, right? Michael Omer was a human being, is a human being before he was anything else. And he understood that what he was actually trying to teach us is how to be open enough as a human being to learn something you might not know you even want to know. Right? That's a gift. It's a different thing, right? It isn't always a pure science. It isn't always, sort of arithmetic or anything that is concrete. And I know people have a hard time. So many people have a hard time with anything that is not concrete. But the things that arts and humanities produce is concrete, and they're the things that actually bring us joy. They're the things that actually make life worth living. There is not a bridge. There's not a bridge on this planet that has kept us alive here. Physically, yes, but here, not a single structure, no building. Right? Like, now listen, do I value STEM? I mean, yes, I'm not, I live in the world, right? I don't value the way that everybody's being pushed to learn it in this way. I think it's kind of strange because I don't know what the world is without artists. Right. After they make the thing, who's going to design it? Like, who's going to create narrative so that the rest of the human beings who connect to narrative more than they connect to anything else are going to actually believe it? If you can't put a story around it, we're not going to get involved. There has to be some narrative there. Everything you've ever done in terms of the money you've spent, you've invested in the story of something. All of us, that's the way it works. Sometimes it's manipulative, sometimes it's enriching and fulfilling, sometimes it's fortifying, and sometimes it's destructive, but it's all the power of art. It's narrative. That's what we all do. every color you see. Like people are always like, oh man, like I have friends who are, I have a lot of friends who are in STEM, and they're like, oh, I want to build this car, I want to do this, that, and the third. And I'm like, listen, STEM gets you a Tesla, right?
Right.
And art gets you a Porsche. And I know it's all about personal taste, but to me, when I think of what I want, it's like the Tesla is interesting and it works and it functions, but boy, oh boy, it's not very interesting to look at. And anybody who drives a Tesla, I'm sorry, but it's okay. They know, you got it for the functionality of it, right? But I think that there's a way that we can have both form and function. I think that sometimes form is function. I think that's what the artist knows. I think that when you have the sort of, I always say with musicians, and you know this better than anybody, there is the science of music and then there is the spirit of music. And those of us who can find the nexus between those two things, then you become Jimi Hendrix, right? Then you become Prince.
That's right.
Right? Like that's how that works. I'd rather that than, right? Like, and I respect Bach and Chopin, I respect Mozart, right? The scientists, it's incredible what they were able to do. I do, but I don't know if I respect them more than I respect William Grant Still. For those of you who know who that is. Right? Somebody who could bring a little extra, that other thing he had, he brought to that orchestral music, and he turned it into something else. So that's where I'm at with the STEM thing. Shout out to all of the engineers and the,
and all the Tesla owners.
All the Tesla folks.
I love it. All right, I need to keep my eye on it because I could talk to you all day. Let's now navigate to questions about your work, Jason. So your work is very much about it's for young adults, they say. That's how it's marketed, right?
Sure.
But when I read Long Way Down, I sat in a corner of a room and bawled. So it's for me too, and I'm no young adult. So could tell us about who do you write for? What's your target?
Yeah, it's interesting. I typically, I like to say that I write to Black children. I write for us all, right? I write for everybody. If you got a heart, right? If you are alive and have breath in the body, then this is for you. Who am I writing to though? I'm writing specifically to Black children for a very specific reason. That reason being that if we don't write to them, and if we don't look to them, and if we don't run toward them, and then we're looking at some of the most brilliant, resilient human beings who will become endangered. Just simply based on the way that this particular country is set up, right? Either we're going to invest or we're going to lose them.
Right.
And so for me, I'm very particular and intentional about why I choose to write toward them, write to them. But the books, at least art, the categories are for marketing. They put my books in a particular category so that they're marketed a particular way in bookstores. They can shelf them in a particular way. But 80% of the statistics say that 80% of my readers are grown.
Get that.
The books are the books. Art is art, right? Like so many people have read Hunger Games. So many adults have read, To Kill a Mockingbird, right? This is a story about a little girl and her best friend next door and all the things happening in her family and community, but it's coming from the perspective of a child. If it came out today, definitely going to be categorized as an adult. We read Lord of the Flies, the strangest children's book of all time. Seriously, right? The most violent book about children killing, for all the kids in the room, it's about children killing children. Because they're stranded on an island, and it literally becomes a savage moment, like the savagery of youth comes out. But if William Golding put that book out today, maybe 10 years ago, because they'd get banned today. But
That's right.
So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you. So you write for all of us, to young Black people.
Yes.
And I would say young Black people around the world.
Yes.
The thing I love about what you represent, Jason, is that you're part of the quote unquote hip hop generation, right? and hip hop is global. So there are a lot of kids, when I was growing up, I'm a generation before you, or a generation or two, I'm not sure. But
I'm 40.
I'm 55.
A generation and a half. One and a half.
Yes. But I do remember growing up in Nigeria and just being told to read Shakespeare and Pride and Prejudice. And it was only when I got Chinua Achebe, Wale Soyinka, and then Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Baldwin, all of that my Blackness became legible, right? So I think your work is incredible for African American kids, but also for Black kids everywhere.
Thank you.
So now we get to Long Way Down. And how many of you have read the book? Let's see. Okay, so most of you, but not everybody. So we're going to try not to spoil anything. But Jason, can you just kind of set the stage for us? What should we be preparing for and coming into this work? And I know it may have changed from the book to the stage, but
Sure. That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
What should you be prepared for? I don't know if I can answer that. What I will say though is what I ask of you as you engage with whatever you're going to see. I think it requires you to wrestle with your biases. I think it's going to require you to activate a different level of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
A long way down is rooted in something that really happened to me. It's rooted in a few things. The death of a friend. It's also rooted in my disappointment in the way people were speaking about teenagers who were rioting in the street after the death of the countless people who have been killed by cops, right? And so like you turn on the TV and you see fire and you see, some kid running down the street with a chair or whatever you see. And the first thing that politicians were saying, including President Barack Obama, who I have respect for, but this was a tricky moment for me because he, a Black man, got on televisions and called these kids thugs. Now, here's the thing. People could say, they're acting like thugs, and so that's what I'm going to call them. And what I would implore you all, as you sort of are about to experience this story, is that the moment you allow yourself to call a child anything other than a child, then you'll convince yourself it's okay to treat them as such. Right? We have to sort of hold the line about what it means to be young, what it means to be a child. And instead of us calling them gangsters and monsters and thugs, we should be asking, why are they so angry? What have they seen in their communities that maybe we have not seen, that has caused such vitriol, such pain, such rage? And if they had the vocabulary to express that rage, would this look like this? When we all were young and you got upset because your mother or your father told you something that you didn't like, and you got all filled up with all the, you get all angry and huffy and puffy, but you can't find the language to express that, or you don't have the freedom to express that. What happens is you break your own toys. You break what's closest to you. We've all done it, right? You break the head off your own dog, right? To try to figure out where to put it. Why do we look at children? Because they're kids. They're 12, 14, 16. They're children, and we look at them as if they're aliens because they're angry instead of questioning why. So Long Way Down is a story where I'm begging you all to ask yourself, why? Why does he feel this way? And can we honor his humanity in the midst of such a complicated moment at such a young age? Because there are people all over this country, there are people 30 minutes from here, people from the neighborhood I just left, who have had to make really, really hard decisions at 15 years old, sometimes landing them in. I got a kid in prison for the rest of his life. He sent me a letter because I don't know what he did, I won't say, but he sent me a letter and said, "Mr. Jason, I read Long Way Down when I was in here, and I'm writing you this letter to tell you that I can't tell you what I did, but I know you'd understand. I know you'd understand how hard it was and why I made the choice I made." And for me, my heart goes out because that kid he didn't fail himself. He was failed by me. and you,
Yeah.
and all of us who didn't offer him more resource, more option, more love. We scared of these kids and act like they don't know we're scared. They feel disrespected by our fear. We're so afraid of our own children. Like, I'm scared they're gonna do that. I get it. But is there anything else with me? What else is there worth risking yourself for? And most of the time, they ain't gonna say nothing to you, cuss you out, call you a name. If you can't handle that, like if you're so sensitive, you can't take a child calling you a name. 14 years old, that breaks your whole day down. Turns you into a fearful person of the children who live in your neighborhood. The problem is here, right? Not with them, right? They're a symptom of the problem. And we need to I really think we have to kind of wrestle with this as adults. And that's what I'm asking you as you sort of partake in Long Way Down.
Again, a bridge can't do that. Right?
A bridge can't do that.
The other thing I really love about Long Way Down is that every character is different.
Yeah.
Every character has a different story, and I think it speaks to the heterogeneity of Blackness. That all of us have different stories, different
Yes.
worldviews, priorities, and so on. So I'm really looking forward to what they've done with it here. In the book, there are certain objects that you include.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I could just mention a few of those objects
Of course.
for you to kind of help us think about. The plastic bags that say thank you. I just thought that was amazing. Yeah.
You guys know those bags? Plastic bags that say like thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
With
Have
smiley
a
faces.
nice day.
Yeah.
Have a nice day. So you want me to really give away some of the symbolism? I can.
No,
I think I'll keep it broad.
Just broad. Yeah.
I mean, plastic bags that say thank you are funny just because. I mean, the irony of it is like, this is the cheapest thank you that you ever. This is right. This is like, I mean, and it's a plastic. It's a thing that would be, especially in particular neighborhoods. It's the thing. It could go. There's a lot of. It's hard to do this.
I know.
First of all, the plastic bag exists in the Black household very differently, right? Which I know my white brothers and sisters in here are like, wait a minute, what's happening with the plastic bag?
Because you should be using paper bags.
The plastic bag is a very specific thing in the Black household, and every Black person in here knows about the plastic bag with the plastic bags in it, right? And how we use them for lots of things. And the other thing, though, is also, but on the flip side, the plastic bag is also a piece of plastic, and it's bad for the world at the same time. So it's this complicated thing about like this. It really is the cheapest. It's the cheapest thank you, right? And I'll leave it there. You'll see. Yeah. And that's going to be in the book. I don't know if that's going to be in the show. So if you haven't read the book, you should read the book.
That's right.
What's another one? The cigarette.
Yeah, it's on here, but I feel like that's too. That's going to be in the show.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the show. Okay, let's move on to another.
Yeah, that's like
yellow tape, and I think that you can talk broadly about yellow tape.
Yeah. You know, that particular, and actually, I'll just talk about that piece because that page. So you know the yellow tape is, right? Murder tape, right? Homicide, and that scene actually comes from something I saw. There were kids. I think I was riding through, like, might have been in Baltimore, might have been St. Louis, somewhere. I'm riding through the neighborhood, and there were kids like using the yellow tape as like streamers. They were like running down the street and using the yellow tape. And I think I wanted to make a statement about how, like, that tape, we know what that tape means, but if you're growing up in an environment where you see that tape often, like what happens to it, like you just get used to it. Like it just becomes the ornament of one's pain, but it becomes the most normal of ornaments, right? Stud earrings. This is like the stud earrings of a person's pain, right? An everyday garment, an everyday accessory that should hurt way more than it does. Should make more of a statement than it does. but it doesn't. In a lot of our communities, the cops. It's an interesting thing to see the cops outside every now and then on my block, and the light could be flashing, and something would have happened, and all the neighbors come out, and everybody's sitting outside and drinking beer and just chatting, as if we're watching a show. Yeah. As if we're like just catching up on the news, right? And then, I live in the city, so they broke homes, so we all are talking to each other across. And it's a strangest experience that no one. It's like, man, I wonder what's going on. And then we're talking about this. We saw so and so run down the street. So and so mom came outside, and this happened and that happened. Like, it's just a weird. And it's not all of us, because I like it you brought up sort of like, we're polylithic people. We have polylithic experiences, right? Not everybody is experiencing this particular thing, or the kids running with the streamers, right? We don't all live in war zones. And like, that's my fear about these kinds of conversations, that I think people start to think like, oh man, it's really hard in a black neighborhood. And it's like, black neighborhoods are amazing. But every now and then, because if the neighborhood happens to also be a working class neighborhood, things can get a little complicated, not because of blackness, but because of poverty. Hunger is a real thing, right? And it causes all sorts of other things to happen. And so I would just ask for that, a little bit of grace there. Like, it's not like, oh man, don't go to Northeast, don't go to Southeast, right? It's like, just stay up here. And it's like, no, it's probably happening up here too, by the way. Oh yeah. It might look a little different, but it's definitely happening up here too. So that's the yellow tape. It's just about the normalcy, the unfortunate normalcy of trauma that so many of us have. So many of us don't know we have. Shout out to all the black people in therapy, because man, the things you just don't. I was talking to my best friend last night, and I was asking him why he can't access his tears. There are a lot of men in my life who cannot access the tears. It's like, oh nah, Jay, I believe you. Crying is healthy. I can't. Like, I don't feel it ever. I can't. Something's wrong. Right? There's trauma that we don't even know we're carrying.
So I have a colleague in the audience, and she knows that if I'm in a meeting, even if I'm in a meeting with like senior staff or the other deans, and my phone rings and it's one of my kids, because my kids look like me, I will answer that phone call. My kids are in their 20s. I have a son who, when he calls, I will always pick it up because of that trauma. Now, keep in mind, I didn't grow up here, right? But they were born here. And I am here now, so
Absolutely.
So we inherit it as well, we inherit it. There's a beautiful line where you say the rules. So the rules are out. So we already know what the rules are.
Right.
It's in the marketing for this show. So we know that there are 3 rules: don't cry, don't snitch, and revenge. Those are the 3 rules. And then you say, quote, rules weren't meant to be broken, they were meant for the broken to follow. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that one?
Yes. So in many of our communities, we operate under a particular ecosystem. And that ecosystem has been set up years before I was ever around. And back in I think it was actually in the 70s coming into the 80s, but my mom had stories from back in the 50s and 60s as well, where the rules had to be what they were because you couldn't depend on any outside justice, right? So like, if I don't sort of figure out how to maneuver in the ecosystem of the neighborhood, then I don't know how the ecosystem upholds itself, because there's never going to be a moment where I feel comfortable calling a police officer to come in and take care of this for me, right? For many of us, yes, people call the cops in our neighborhoods, right? But like, there are a lot of people, especially if you're an older school person, who it's a last resort to call a police officer, because you don't feel safe and you don't believe that the cop will actually care about what you got going on. My friend who was killed, cops never even tried to solve his case. We knew that when he got killed, right? And so these rules, no crying, no snitching. First of all, I think so much of it is rooted in masculinity, which is a whole other conversation that we can have at a different point, because I have so much to say.
I have so much to ask
but I won't do that. So I think there's that element of it. The other thing is, like I say, the mistrust of any kind of outside authority to manage the community for us. It's like, no, we'll manage it ourselves. And then there's the other thing where there are rules that we follow with reckless abandon that require some editing, and that have evolved into like a mess. And snitching is a mess now. So the kids today, so all the kids in the room, because I know y'all that you've heard people talking about so-and-so the snitch and Gunners and snitch and all these people, right? You've heard all this stuff on pop culture. Snitching was something. So my older brother, street kid, my uncles, street folks, right? Everybody kind of doing their thing. My cousins, right? Snitching was about if you were a criminal, if you were somebody who was working in this space, right? You made your money illegally. If you got busted, you could not then turn and say, but what about all of them who work illegally too? Because you signed up for it, right? You're playing the game we're playing. We all have to follow the same rules. If you are what they call a civilian, if you're Miss Jenkins who live on the block and her house gets robbed, she gets to call the cops. She gets to snitch on you because she is not a gangster. She is not in the crime world. She is not dealing drugs or selling whatever or boosting or carjacking. She is not in that world. Y'all know what boosting is? If you're sitting next to somebody who don't, just kidding. But if you're in that world, then you follow the rules. If you're not in that world, you do not have to abide by those rules. Which is why back then the rules were very strict about how to comport yourself in the community. So like they knew Sundays was off limits, old ladies were off limits, children were off limits, like all this stuff that sort of went into a criminal sort of space as everybody tried to use an ecosystem to figure out financial gain for themselves at a very tough time in America, right? All that being said, what's happening today is you got kids believing that anyone who tells is a snitch, and so no one tells. And because no one tells, there's a whole bunch of innocent kids sitting in juvie because they feel like they can't tell, they can't snitch. And when I go and see those kids, which is why this book is dedicated to the kids in juvenile detention centers, because I've been to 40 of them probably all around the world, and we have the worst, by the way, you should know that, and we have the only maximum security juvies, and we're the only country in the world that a child can get a life sentence. I just want to make sure you all know all of that. And so I go into the juvies and you're talking to the kids. These are 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. They come in, and I don't care how you feel about our children. It is impossible for you to ever see a 12-year-old as anything other than a 12-year-old when they walk in the room. Right. It don't matter if they got on blues, greens, or browns, if they got their hands behind their backs, or if they got irons on their wrists. It is impossible for you to see a 12-year-old as anything other than a little boy when he walks in the room. And they come in the room, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, I'm not allowed to ask what they're in there for. But I'm like, yo, so tell me what's going on. And they're like, oh, neighborhood stuff, you know what I mean? His crew, my crew, this, that, and the third, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm really in here doing my man's numbers, meaning I'm taking meaning my friend did the crime. I got caught. So I'm in here doing his time, right? And he's like, because you know how it is, Mr. Reynolds, ain't no snitching, right? And he's looking at me like, I know you understand what I'm saying, but he doesn't understand that I come from a very different generation. And so I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, no snitching, man. Like, I got caught, so I can't. And I understood and I get like, yo, that's my man. It's brotherhood. It ain't his fault he didn't get caught. I got caught. And I was like, let me explain to you what a friend is. Let me tell you what a brother is. A brother wouldn't let another brother ruin his life for him. A brother takes accountability for his own actions. He takes responsibility for the things that he's done. There's no way I would let my best friend do 10 years in prison for me. There's no way. I'm like, is he checking on your mother? I don't think. Has he been in here to see you? Has he come by? You at DC jail. He lived around the corner. Has he popped in? I ain't seen him in a little bit. Is he checking on your mom? I don't really know, man. She ain't say that. You know what I mean? Oh, all right. I'm not sure this is your brother. Right? I understand the rules, but I think that they're so convoluted now that young people just believe that like you got to zip it up. And I'm like, nah. And look, if you don't want to tell the cops that was your man, you definitely need to tell your man to soldier up. You need to tell your man. If since y'all all want to be men so bad, tell your man to be a man. Right. Tell your man to come in here and say, yo, it was me. Be a G. If everybody want to be a G so bad, which is what long way back down also challenges is like you want to do this so bad, then do it. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it and you know you don't want to do it, don't play with it. Because there's people out here who ain't playing, right? And so that's really where the rules and revenge is also, the revenge thing came from the same juvie visits where the kids, I finally got to ask questions about like, how does the blood, like how did the neighborhood beefs begin? Same thing with Baltimore and DC, by the way. The strange sort of, for those of you who don't know, there's always been a weird sort of thing between Baltimore and DC, right? And it's not a real thing, but it's this thing because you get older and you realize, I love Baltimore. They loved it. Like all my friends were like, man, we come down to DC all the time to party. Like it was like, you know, and so, but this Baltimore DC thing started like 50 years ago in prison, a prison beef, right? The neighborhood crews in the Bay that are having all these problems, the kids are shooting each other, started 50 years before they were born, in prison over a pair of shoes. Over a pair of shoes. And they don't even know this. This is what their teachers and OGs are coming to me like, man, this started like over a pair of shoes. One man didn't like being made fun of or being joked on. So he kills a man, neighborhood, he kills this man. It's all happening in the prison. And then it spills out. And 50 years later, 14, 15-year-olds carrying the same flags, doing the same, like, it's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, there's also an underlying, like the DC Baltimore thing between Africans and African Americans as well.
Absolutely.
Which
oh man,
we can talk about. That's another whole
that's
thing.
A whole other thing.
That's another whole thing. Okay, but I was instructed that I should give a couple questions to the audience. So we don't have time for too many, but if we have a couple brave individuals.
It'll be like lightning round. I did
right here. I saw your hand. If you just
we'll
say the question and we'll repeat it.
Okay. Hello, Jason. I'm from I met you about 20 years ago.
You look so familiar. I was about to say you look so familiar.
Yes, I'm a big fan of yours since Saturday's open mic night. But thank you for being here and thank you for just doing all you do for the Black community. So I am now one of those politicians. I don't say bad things about kids, but I try not to. But in Maryland, recently passed legislation, which juvenile justice reform, that has now changed jurisdiction for certain kids for 10 to 12 for certain crimes. And so right now our conversations are like, well, how do we bring resources to deal with the trauma of youth? And so my question to you is, which is more important, bring the resources or really getting to the emotional trauma and trying to deal with that first?
The resources as far as what?
Like, how do you deal with the trauma after the violence is over in the community, the families, when they recover, when someone does get shot in the family, bills gotta get paid, some people gotta go to work, things like that.
Yeah.
Like how do you do that? And for the children, what do we do to make sure they get the appropriate care or just the everyday needs that family might not be lacking?
Yeah, I think this is the conundrum. Like I don't know. I'm always very careful because I only know what I know, right? And so I'm always, the worst people in the world are people who think that they know one thing, they know all the things.
That's right.
And I don't know if I know the answer to this question. I think at this point in my life, I'm aware enough to know that life is really hard when you can't keep a roof over your head. Hierarchy of needs is a real thing, right? Like this, like without the basic things, I don't know. It's really hard to get a kid to talk to a therapist if there's no food in the house. Like that's just the reality, right? Like I love therapy. Best thing that ever happened to me. Also, a tremendous privilege.
Yeah.
A tremendous privilege. And so if I had to answer it, I would say resources first. Honestly, if I'm being, which sucks because we have to deal with what we have to deal with, but I probably would say resources first. I think it's complicated though, and I don't know. It could probably, somebody else probably like, nah, you gotta go here first, right? I think it could go either way.
Thank you.
So I'm asking this question on behalf of my 109th grade students
Sure.
who have read your book this year, and it's not a spoiler to say that the book ends openly. Right?
It's kind of a spoiler, but it's okay. You did it already. Like, luckily, 75% of them have read the book, right? She said it's not a spoiler to tell you all exactly how the book ends. You say so. Okay, what's your question?
What's the question?
I referred to in this interview once saying that you overwrote it by 30 pages, and that you overwrote it, you wrote what the actual ending was.
Mm.
So I wanted to know if you did that, and if you ever would reveal
It's so funny because I did do that, but I stopped telling people I did that.
And I couldn't find it in the
Yeah, I started to lie about it, and be like I never wrote another page after that, but I did write all the way through, and then chopped it all off, ended it. And you want, so yes, I did do that. I did do that. No.
Thank you. Yes, sir, young man right there. Oh, nice question.
And look, so look both ways. Ryan, look both ways. Do all the stories end on the cliffhanger. Man, have you read any of the other books yet? Any of my other books yet? So you know they are. So you know they are. You know they cliffhanger. And the one that was just spoiled by you. So let me answer your question. So all of my stories, for the most part, end pretty abruptly. And the reason why is because I'm aware that there are young people reading these books, and I think that I'm obligated to activate their imagination. I respect them too much to tie it up. I think that if anybody ever tells you the whole thing at the end of a story, it's because they don't respect your intellectual capacity. They don't believe that you have a brain strong enough to do logic and reason to figure out how you feel about the story that you just read. It gave you 350 pages. You got the brain power to write one, right? Right, and so that is sort of why all the books take that way.
Okay, let's do this one, and then I'll come around on this. Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really scary is society being numb. I mean, if one person is shot on the street, it gets a 10-second soundbite and then on to weather and sports.
Yeah.
And we're part of the problem too, because it doesn't register, it doesn't impact. You hear it so much, it just becomes white noise.
Sure. I agree. You know what I will say to that though, because I think you're right. The other thing though is, as numb as we are to a body in the street, I think we're far even more numb to the people who live around us that we don't speak to. We're always focused on the body in the street. You got neighbors you ain't never spoke to, right? We should do that. It may actually change the temperature of the community, so that we do care when the body's in the street.
Yes, sir.
First, I want to say it's great to be here. As an educator myself, I'm from Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I teach in Southeast DC.
Shout out.
It was common on the traumas that my kids deal with, face. And a lot of times it's not recognized. I feel like as a teacher, some of my issues are looking at my kids who are dealing with similar traumas that even as a grown man I have yet to myself.
Brother, amen to that. I think that's what we know. Those of us like yourself who work in the classroom or who are around the kids, you from Baltimore, so I already know what it is. The kids who have experienced and seen things. I think sometimes that's why I love kids so much. I think that they can hold up a mirror in a way that no other humans can. They're the most human of the humans, right? And I think they can hold up a mirror in ways that actually might challenge us to start digging through some of that and seeing if we can suss it out so that we can serve them. Because if you're a teacher on the South Side, that means you're there because you love them, brother, because you wouldn't be there, right? If you teach on the South Side, you're there because you love those kids. And if you love those kids, then you will do what you have to do to serve them, even if it means serving you to figure out some of the stuff. The better we are, the better it is for them, right? Like, we'll talk after, but we have to model this, bro. We have to model this.
So my question isn't as deep, but do you have a favorite character from Long Way Down?
From a long way down. My favorite character in all my books are the girls. Any book I've ever written, the girls, Danny is my favorite. If you read Boy in the Black Suit, Love. If you read Brave as You, Tess. If you read Patina, right? Like I really love all the girl characters because I've always felt safer around girls. And I'm a mama's boy for real. And not in the weird way, in the grown-up way, but like and also I grew up in a family in a neighborhood where I never knew damsels. And because I never knew that, I've never known, I only knew them on Disney movies. I'd never seen it. No woman around me ever needed to be saved by me. They spent their time and energy saving me all the time. And so the women in my books are the women that I grew up with, the girls I grew up with, who loved me and who I love, for sure.
There's a great line in the book when William asks Danny something, and Danny responds, one of the best exchanges in the whole book.
About the gun? When they go back.
Yeah, love that, love it. Anyone else? Because I have one last question and then we have to wrap it up. Okay, so let me take the privilege of having the last question. So there's a reference in the book to two rappers, of course, Tupac and Biggie, who allegedly had lots of beef. We know there are two other rappers right now that are having lots of beef.
Yeah.
So talk about toxicity and masculinity and all of that. So so the question but I do want to stay with Tupac and Biggie. What did those two icons offer someone like you?
You know, a lot. I think Tupac, for me, I still think Dear Mama is one of the best songs ever made.
Oh, love that.
It's like, and not maybe because the Mama Boys thing, but I really just think like, man, it's just a beautiful song. And so I think Tupac represented sort of the duality or the multiplicity of a person. And I think he represented the dangers of masculinity. Because I think that he was a man who understood his power. He knew what it was. But what he didn't know was that it wasn't as powerful as the looming sort of nonsense that would come with just being a man in the world, with everybody looking at you and what it was supposed to mean, right? The violence that you were supposed to carry with you, right? The courage that, like the outsized courage that we're supposed to have, that most of us don't and don't want to have. Most of us aren't even built that way because we're just people too, right? Like not everybody is brave, right? Tupac spitting in the face of the cop and like all this stuff, right? Or the camera, right? Or Tupac, all the things that were like almost like myths when we were growing up. Like, man, Tupac, he's the real deal. Meanwhile, he's an art kid from Baltimore City. He was an art kid, right? He was an art kid from Baltimore City, raised by the Panthers, raised by civil rights revolutionaries who knew very well who he was, what he was supposed to do, and he knew all those things. But we still are in the world, and things happen when you're in the world. And so I respect and love him for because I am that too. But personally, let me tell y'all something. This is the funniest thing in the world. I know we have to wrap. This is the funny thing in the world is because of the work I've done over the last 20 years. People are always surprised when they see me outside at the bar. And I always tell people, I am not a child. Right? I am a grown man who can do whatever he wants to do. But it's so hard for people to recognize that I could be a whole person, a masterpiece and a mess, which is what I am. Right? And I think for Biggie, man, I think there was just a certain kind of he just had an energy. He had a moxie, a confidence that was very different than Tupac, right? Tupac was conventionally attractive, right? It was hot, you know what I mean?
Yes,
and then you had Biggie, who was sort of this guy who himself said black and ugly as ever, right? He had a lazy eye. He was a big guy, and yet he moved through the world like a king. Right? And what I love about his story is the same thing I love about Pop. He too was just a good boy. Neighborhood kid whose mom wouldn't let him play outside because the neighborhood was too dangerous. Jamaican woman said, we're not doing none of that. You're gonna be in here, you're gonna go to Catholic school, you're gonna come home, you're gonna do your homework, and you're gonna stand on this stoop, and that's as far as you're gonna go. Right? When he died, his mother said, Biggie never missed a Christmas. He never missed a birthday. Like he rapped about it. That wasn't his reality, right? And so when I think about Biggie, I think about, again, the multiplicity of men, the need to feel, the need to find significance through struggle, even if it is contrived. And like asking ourselves, why do we my theory about the hood, about some of the poor neighborhoods. I'm around it all the time, and I love it, right? But it's also like I have friends who are like, yo, man, it's just so hard to make it out of here. And I'm like, well, sure, but you haven't tried. And so it's easy for you to make peace with the fact that you haven't tried if you blame the hood. And then if you do make it out, the story would be it's going to be 10 times bigger than what actually happened, because you get to lean on making it out of the hood. So you're exploiting the narrative every which way and any way you turn it. And to me, that is not love. That means you don't love it. You don't love your community, right? You're exploiting your community to be apathetic, right? And so I think about all of those things when I think about Biggie, and because he exploited his neighborhood. He exploited what everybody else was doing. Biggie sold dope for like 2 weeks. And it's like, all right, now I can write about being a kingpin, right? Right? It's like it's such an interesting thing. So that's how I feel about Biggie and Pac. I think they were human beings. I think they were artists. I think they imagined their lives, and I think they created them with pen and pad. And I think it blessed the world and it ruined them. And that's the way I feel.
That's powerful. And I think for Biggie, it's juicy when he talks about his teachers as well, right? And the dream killers.
Oh, the dream killers.
The
They're
dream
everywhere.
killers, right? They're everywhere. So we are going to get ready for this beautiful, wonderful show. I believe I've heard it might be a movie as well.
Which I mean, I wrote it a long time ago. Universal had it for years. They ended up dropping the ball. So eventually. I mean, the pieces are there. We just got to find a studio. So hopefully sometime soon. We'll see.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. So y'all, can we thank Jason Reynolds?